15 minutes before the wedding was set to begin, I was still in the dressing room, adjusting my bow tie in the mirror. Intern Chen, 26 years old, had just secured the first round of funding for my startup career on the rise. Today, I was supposed to marry my girlfriend of 3 years, Vivian. My mum pushed the door open, her face unnaturally pale, clutching an envelope in her trembling fingers. "Ethan, you'd better see this yourself," she said. The envelope bore Vivian's handwriting, hurried, messy, only 3 lines. "Ethan, I'm sorry, I'm leaving with Jason. I thought I loved you. But only today did I realize Jason is the one I want to spend my life with. Don't look for me." Jason. The name hit me like a slap. He was an intern we'd hired just last month, a senior in college, fair-skinned and polite, had brought Vivian coffee a few times. I'd never thought twice about it. My best man, Ryan Liu, glanced at the letter and exploded. "What the hell?" Vivian's lost her mind running off with an intern. He reached for his phone, but I stopped him. "Don't call," I said. "If she wants to leave, let her go." My hands were shaking too, though not from heartbreak, from rage. The banquet hall held over 300 guests, both families, business partners, everyone. The bride had bolted. The Chen family's reputation would be shredded. The MC knocked for the 3rd time. My mother's eyes were red, and she clutched my sleeve. Speechless, I made a decision that no one expected. I straightened my suit, pushed the door open and strode into the banquet hall. The spotlight hit me, and 300 pairs of eyes turned. The MC, seeing me alone on stage, faltered for a moment, then hurriedly handed me the microphone. "The groom is on stage first. Let's give him a warm." I took the mic and cut him off. "Ladies and gentlemen," I said, "we need to adjust today's schedule. The bride has been changed." The hall went silent for 2 seconds, then erupted. Vivian's mother shot up, her voice shrill. "Ethan, what nonsense are you talking? Where's Vivian?" I held up the letter and read it aloud, word for word. When I finished, the room was dead quiet. Vivian's father went from red to white to pale green, then slumped back into his chair, speechless. My mother tugged at my jacket from behind, whispering that we should leave. Didn't move, because I saw someone. At the very back of the hall, near the entrance, stood a woman in a white dress. She was still, watching the scene like a detached observer, but her eyes were fixed on me. Natalie Lin. She was a legend in our year at Fairfield University, sent abroad by her family right after freshman year to study, with a business empire spanning real estate, finance, and shipping. She was on the Forbes list. We had almost no interaction in college, barely nodding acquaintances. Why was she at my wedding? Had no time to think. Vivian's mother was wailing, business associates were whispering, and chaos was spreading. I took a deep breath and did something utterly insane. Walked off the stage, crossed the entire hall through all those stunned stares, and stopped in front of Natalie. "Miss Lin," I said, "would you be interested in being today's bride?" The collective gasp from the crowd still rings in my ears. Natalie held my gaze for 3 seconds. Those 3 seconds stretched like an eternity. Then the corner of her mouth curved up. "I've been waiting for that invitation for 4 years," she said. I froze. Without another word, she turned and walked to a side dressing room. About 10 minutes later, she emerged, and everyone froze. She was wearing a wedding gown, not an off-the-rack one, but custom-made, every seam perfect, every fold tailored to her frame. She came to me, looked up, and there was a glint in her eyes. "Ethan, I've imagined this scene so many times in this gown. I just never thought it would actually happen." The MC had completely lost his script. Half the guests were already pulling out phones to record. Vivian's mother stormed up, pointing at Natalie. "Who the hell are you? What gives you the right to stand here?" Natalie turned to face her, to face everyone. "My name is Natalie Lin," she said. "The Lin Holdings is my family's company, and I am now its sole heir. Do you think I have the right to stand here?" Those 2 words, Lin Holdings, landed like a bomb. The room stopped breathing. Vivian's mother stood frozen, her arm still raised. Several business tycoons in the front row exchanged looks. One of them even stood up and gave a slight nod toward Natalie. And I stood beside her, thinking only one thing. This wedding was far from over. After Natalie dropped that line, The atmosphere in the hall transformed completely. The guests who had been gawking now wore very different expressions. Mr. In Zhao from Grandview Properties, seated at the head table, was the first to react. He rose with his glass, wearing the warmest smile of the evening. "Miss Lin, what a pleasure. I had the honor of meeting you at your group's annual gala last year. What a coincidence to meet again today." His words were polished, perfectly walking the line between respect and self-preservation. Vivian's mother stood frozen on the floor, her arms still raised, lips quivering. Her father pulled her back, muttering under his breath, "Stop it! That's Richard Lin's daughter." He spoke quietly, but those nearby heard, and knowing glances passed among them. Richard Lin. The name needed no introduction in the business world. Natalie ignored the murmurs. She turned to me, her gaze calm as still water. "Ethan, are you sure you want to marry me? I'll give you 3 minutes to change your mind." "I don't need 3 minutes," I said. She studied me, a faint smile tugging at her lips, then turned to the MC as if instructing an assistant on a routine meeting. "Continue," she said. "Follow the normal process." The MC took a full 5 seconds to snap out of it, frantically flipping through his cards. The wedding resumed. Natalie and I stood face to face. Over 300 people watched, some recording, some on the phone, no doubt spreading the news. The Lin heiress stepping in as a replacement bride. That kind of story would be explosive in any circle. Natalie spoke first, her voice low but clear. "Ethan, I won't make grand vows, but today, standing here, the Lin family's doors are open to you, and its resources are yours." I mean every word. It didn't sound like a promise, more like the opening of a business contract, but I heard the weight. She wasn't giving me a pledge. She was putting her whole life in my hands. When it was my turn, I paused for a few seconds. 300 eyes bored into me, and I almost laughed. 3 hours ago, I'd been picking out pearl counts for Vivian's gown, and now I stood here with a near stranger, saying what should have been said to someone else. But sometimes you have to see clearly what truly matters. "Natalie," I said, "I won't talk about forever. I'll just say this. You stand beside me today, and as long as you stay, I will never let you regret this decision." Her eyes glistened, just a little, then she blinked it away. When we exchanged rings, my hand trembled slightly, not from nerves, but because her fingers were cold, as if she'd been waiting in the wind for a long time. As I slid the ring onto her finger, she gave my hand a brief squeeze. That squeeze meant more to me than the ring itself. When the MC pronounced us married, the applause was louder than any wedding I'd ever heard. Mr. Zhao clapped the hardest, and several of my suppliers followed suit, practically slapping their hands raw. Then the banquet hall doors burst open. Vivian stood at the entrance, hair disheveled, makeup half ruined. Clearly she'd run all the way back. In behind her, a flustered hotel security guard tried to explain something, but no one listened. Vivian's gaze darted from me to Natalie, then to our joined hands. Her face cycled through 3 shades of shock. "Ethan, you," her voice caught. Natalie glanced at her, expression unchanged, as if looking at a stranger, but she tightened her grip on my hand. All eyes turned to Vivian, curious, amused, contemptuous, and some just hungry for drama. Vivian's mother shot up and grabbed her daughter's arm, her voice shrill. "What are you doing back here? You ran. You shouldn't have come. Do you have any idea what's happening now?" Vivian pulled free, her eyes locked on me. "Ethan, I need to talk to you. Alone." I didn't move. "Say it here in front of everyone. This wedding has been a public spectacle from the start. No need for secrets." She bit her lip, eyes reddening, a look that would have softened me once. "Not anymore." Natalie spoke up. "Miss Shah, every word you wrote in that letter has been read aloud to everyone here. You chose Jason. This wedding has nothing to do with you anymore. The person standing beside Ethan is me." She turned to me, her eyes holding something unreadable. I put my arm around Natalie's waist. The room went silent again. That gesture said more than any words. The woman at Ethan Chen's side had changed from this moment on. Vivian watched my arm and tears finally spilled. She stepped back, once, twice, then turned and ran out. Her mother chased after her, shouting, then stomped her foot and followed. Her father stayed in his seat, head down, a shattered statue. I looked down at Natalie. "Come on, bride. We still have to toast the guest." She smiled faintly. "You're my husband now. You can stop calling me bride." She said it lightly, but I knew from this day forward my life had been rewritten. By the third table, Mr. Zhao from Grandview Properties stood and clinked his glass against mine. "Mr. Chen, we should stay in touch. Grandview has a warehousing project on the East Coast, and we're looking for partners. I'll have my team send over the proposal." He spoke to me, but his eyes kept drifting to Natalie. He knew exactly what was happening. 30 minutes ago, I was a laughingstock. Now the head of Grandview was calling me brother, not because I'd grown 3 heads, but because the woman beside me was a Lin. Natalie nodded graciously. "Mr. Zhao, you're too kind. I've seen Ethan's company's work. It's solid. Let's set up a meeting to discuss details." After the 5th table, Ryan pulled me aside and shoved his phone in my face. "Ethan, look at this." On screen was a photo, a taxi back seat, a guy with his arm around a pink-haired girl, snuggled together. The guy was Jason. The caption read, "Jason is something else, runs off with the bride in the morning, finds a new girl by noon." Ryan said, "This was posted 20 minutes ago." Jason never took Vivian to the Maldives. He bought himself a one-way ticket to London, but Lin's people stopped him at the airport. I looked over at Natalie. She was standing by the main table talking to my mother, slightly bent, her profile softened by the chandelier lights. My mother held her hand, eyes still red, but smiling. As I walked over, I caught my mother saying, "Natalie, you and Ethan knew each other in college?" Natalie nodded. "Yes, Auntie. We were in the same year at Fairfield, but he didn't know me back then." My mother patted her hand, beaming. "Well, you know each other now, that's what matters." Natalie glanced at me, a meaningful look in her eyes. She lowered her voice. "Ethan, there's something you should know." Jason was stopped at the airport. "He isn't just a cheater, he's a corporate spy. Vanguard Capital planted him in your company." My grip on my glass tightened. She continued, unhurried but precise. "He worked for you for 3 months. He leaked your internal pricing proposals to Vanguard's investment director, Zhao Dongming, 3 times. That $200,000 order you lost last month, that was him. And Vivian, she was their final move to destroy you." She pulled a brown envelope from her bag. "Our legal team worked overnight to dig this up. Innie got the full file this morning." "How did you know to look?" I asked. "I started looking last night while you were asleep." She paused, her voice soft. "Ethan, I didn't do this to get even. Innie just thought you deserved to know the truth, that you were played, not that you weren't worth loving." I opened the envelope and flipped through page after page, bank statements, emails, screenshots, employment records, every piece crystal clear. Innie tucked them back in and let out a long breath. "Thank you." She smiled. "Thank me? You're my husband now. Anyone hurts you, they hurt me. And I don't let anyone push me around." She stood, walked to the center of the stage, and tapped the microphone. In silence fell over the 300-plus guests. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began. "Today is my wedding day with Ethan. Normally my father would give this speech, but he couldn't make it tonight, so I'll say it myself." She paused, scanning the room. "Some of you might think this wedding was thrown together, that I'm a last-minute substitute. Let me set the record straight. I am Natalie Lin, sole heir of Lin Holdings. Under our family charter, my spouse automatically receives 5% of the group's equity and, after 3 years of marriage, joins the board. The group's current market capitalization is approximately $5.5 billion. That means my husband, Ethan Chen, is now officially worth over $280 million. Dead silence. Mr. Zhao's glass froze mid-air. My suppliers' mouths hung open. Vivian's father remained slumped in the corner, never raising his head. And Natalie set down the microphone, walked back to me, and naturally took my arm. For 3 seconds, no one moved. Then applause crashed like a wave. Innie looked at her profile as she took a sip of wine, hand steady, composure flawless. But I noticed her fingers gripping my arm, knuckles slightly white. Was that 5% and 280 million real, or did you make it up? I whispered. She set down her glass and looked me in the eye. "Ethan, I never lie about business. Every word I said is true. She paused, a hint of a smile. But one thing I didn't mention, Dad just texted. He wants to see you tomorrow. He set up several hurdles, and you'll have to clear every one. Being a Lin son-in-law isn't easy. The reception wound down around 10. Mr. Zhao shook my hand vigorously, insisting we have dinner soon. My mother clung to Natalie, and Ryan finally coaxed her into the car. As Natalie and I stepped out of the banquet hall, someone rushed out of the elevator. Vivian. She'd changed into a fresh dress, but she looked worse than before, eyes swollen, phone clutched in her hand, screen still lit with that photo of Jason and the pink-haired girl. She ran up to us, glanced at Natalie, then fixed her gaze on me. "Ethan, I need to talk to you. One last time. After that, I'll go." Natalie looked at me and loosened her grip. "I'll wait in the car." "No," I said. "Stay right here." Natalie stopped, nodded, and stepped back against the wall. Vivian watched her move away, her lips trembling. "So now you won't even talk to me alone." "This is my wedding day," I said. "My wife is right here. Say whatever you need to say." Vivian bit her lip, tears welling. She held up her phone, showing the photo. "You saw this? Jason never took me to the Maldives. He bought a single ticket to London for himself. He was lying to me the whole time." "I know," I said. "You know?" "What else do you know?" "That he was stealing your proposals? That he was a spy for Vanguard? That he went after me just to wreck your wedding?" Her voice shook, not with anger, but with the despair of utter devastation. "I know all of it," I said. Vivian froze. Tears fell, one after another, but her voice grew hoarser. "Then why didn't you tell me?" "Vivian, you left a note 15 minutes before the ceremony and ran off with Jason. When exactly was I supposed to tell you?" She had no answer. More tears streamed. "Ethan, I was wrong. Inni, no, I was wrong. Can you forgive me?" Her voice was barely a whisper, her eyes holding a mix of guilt, despair, and the last dying ember of hope. In silence in the hallway, Natalie leaned against the wall, silent, expressionless, just waiting. Inni spoke. "Vivian, you already know you were wrong. I don't need to forgive you for that. But here's what I can't forgive. You made your decision without ever giving me a chance to explain. You never told me what you were unhappy about. You just left. Did you ever think about what today meant to me? To the 300 people waiting? To my mother, who spent 3 months preparing?" Vivian's shoulders shook. She seemed to collapse against the wall. "That's enough," I said. "Go home." She didn't move. Her gaze shifted from me to Natalie and back. She laughed, a sound uglier than crying. "So now you're the Lin Holdings prince, Intern? Did you marry Natalie because you love her, or just to get back at me?" Natalie stepped forward. "Miss Xia," she said, her voice level but firm, "let me tell you 3 things. First, Ethan and I knew each other in college. He saved me. I loved him for 4 years and waited for him. Second, after you left, he walked up to me and asked me to be his bride. You threw away what I picked up. That's not revenge, it's fate. Third, you ask if he's sincere? That question doesn't need an answer, because he's spending his life with me, not you." Vivian's face went pale under the hallway lights. Natalie took my arm and turned toward the elevator. After 2 steps, she stopped, without looking back. "Miss Xia, Jason owed you what you got. That was your choice. Inthan owes you nothing. He did nothing wrong. Don't come looking for him again." As the elevator doors closed, I caught a glimpse of Vivian crouched in the hallway, face buried in her hands, shoulders heaving. The car was quiet. Natalie sat in the passenger seat, buckled in, watching the city lights. "Thank you for back there," I said. "Don't thank me." I meant every word. She paused, then turned to me with a slight smile. "But you do owe me one. You'll have to pay it back." "How?" "Tomorrow when you meet my father. You'll have to take on his challenges one by one. If you get through them, you won't owe me anymore." She turned to look out the window as the city lights flickered across her profile. I said nothing more, but I knew tomorrow's battle would be the real one. The next morning, I drove Natalie to the Lin family home at East Hill Estate. The atmosphere in the car was tense. Natalie toyed with her seatbelt, and for the first time I saw her nervous. "Is your father really that intimidating?" I asked. You don't know him, she said. He never gives his approval easily. When 7 board elders once tried to force him out, he sat alone in a meeting room for 2 hours, just drinking tea, and when he came out, his hair had gone half grey, but all 7 were gone from the board. She paused. He tests people not by what they say, but by how they hold up under pressure. So this is a modern-day Hongman banquet. You could say that, but you held your own in front of 300 people yesterday. I think you can handle this. At the house, the living room held more than just Richard Lin. Besides him and his wife, there were Aunt, Uncle Henry, Auntie, and a young man I hadn't met before, Kevin Zhao. This was no casual family dinner. Richard sat in the center, resting on a rosewood walking stick. He didn't stand when I entered. So you're Ethan Chen? Sit. I sat. He got straight to the point. I heard about yesterday. Natalie has always had a mind of her own, and I don't interfere with her decisions. But you're still a stranger to me. With strangers, I like to check the books first. The man in gold-rimmed glasses, our CFO, Mr. Zhong, spoke up. Mr. Chen, Lin Holdings currently has a market cap of about $5.5 billion with 12 wholly owned subsidiaries. From a business standpoint, your position is equivalent to an asset package worth roughly $280 million. Legal director Mr. Chen continued, we've checked your background, 26 from a modest family, started your own business, last valuation at $30 million. In terms of assets, you're 3 orders of magnitude below the Lin family. Polite, but the knives were out. Mr. Lin, I said, you're absolutely right.
But let me ask you, when you started your first company, how much were you worth?
The room went still for a moment. Kevin snorted. Ethan, do you think you're something special? Natalie and I grew up together, our families. Enough, Natalie cut in, her voice like ice. Kevin, if I hear another word like that, not even the Zhao family name will protect you. Richard ignored the exchange, his eyes fixed on me. Ethan, when I started out at 20, I had $3,000, but I made 30 workers follow me through thick and thin. What do you have? When I started, I didn't even have 3,000. My first employee, Ryan, gave up a 40,000 salary for 800 a month. Now, we have 37 people. Yesterday, after that wedding fiasco, everyone showed up at 9 this morning, not a single resignation. Mr. Lin, does that count? Richard said nothing, but his grip on his walking stick shifted slightly. Mr. Zhong spoke again, his tone softer. Mr. Chen, if you're open to investment from Lin Holdings, we can help you scale up. Investment is negotiable, I said. But I have one condition. No matter how much Lin Holdings puts in, I keep operational control and my team stays intact. Your people can sit on the board, but not in management. If that's not acceptable, forget the funding. Silence again. Mr. Zhong instinctively glanced at Richard. Richard was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Ethan, that condition you just named, that's exactly what I said when I turned down my first investor. He stood, walked over with his cane, and stopped in front of me. Natalie has always had high standards. Anyone who made her wait 4 years is no pushover. Natalie spoke up. Dad, there's something I never told you. Sophomore year, when I came back to handle my leave, I ran into 3 thugs behind Fairfield's back gate. Ethan saved me. She pulled something from her pocket and placed it on the coffee table, a faded plastic keychain with the university basketball team logo. This fell in a puddle that day. I searched for 4 years through alumni records, club rosters, team photos to find out who he was. But by then, he was already with Vivian. Her voice was calm, but her knuckles were white around the keychain. Yesterday, I went to his wedding in that gown, planning to finally let go. Then Vivian ran. He walked up to me and asked if I'd be his bride. Dad, I waited 4 years without ever finding a reason to speak up. And then he came to me. Everyone in the room fell silent. Aunt and Uncle Henry exchanged glances. Auntie froze with her teacup mid-air. Even Kevin's smirk vanished. Richard looked at the faded keychain for a long time. Then he spoke, his voice low but heavy. Ethan, my daughter owes you a life. You owe her 4 years. From today, your accounts are settled. You passed my test. He turned toward the stairs, then stopped without looking back. The wedding gifts, count them as the Lin family's betrothal gift. The amount is up to you. Don't say it's too little. Last time I said those 4 words, I gave 1 million. He climbed the stairs, his cane tapping steadily. Kevin stood up, face pale, and left without a word. Aunt and Uncle Henry followed, giving me complicated looks but saying nothing. Only Natalie and I remained. She looked at me with something I'd never seen before, relief, pride, and a hint of bittersweet release after 4 years of suppression. Ethan, that condition you laid out at the table, keeping operational control, that's exactly the kind of backbone my father respects most. I wasn't trying to impress him. He meant it. She smiled and stood. Come on, let's go see my mother. She's much tougher than my father. I followed her down the hallway, sunlight streaming through the windows. Her shadow stretched long, and mine overlapped hers. One thought filled my mind. I was going to win this fight. Within 3 days of returning from the Lin house, Jason's case took a new turn. Natalie got a call from legal director Mr. Chen. Zhao Dongming of Vanguard Capital had given a full confession, naming a list of companies including the client I'd lost last month. That client's procurement director had taken a 200,000 kickback from Vanguard, deliberately waiting for my quote before undercutting it. Natalie hung up and said, Zhao confessed that Jason had already sent your next round funding pitch deck to Vanguard a week before the wedding. Their plan was to expose you on your wedding day, then poach your staff while your morale was low. The wedding was step 1, bankruptcy was step 2. I sat in silence for a while. Does Vivian know? Not yet.
Let her know.
Natalie gave me a look, didn't ask why, and made a call. In an hour later, Vivian appeared downstairs at our apartment. She wore a plain grey cardigan, hair pulled back casually, a completely different person from before. I led her to the living room. Natalie placed all the legal documents on the coffee table, bank statements, Zhao's confession, Jason's employment records, even surveillance screenshots of Jason meeting Zhao at a cafe. Miss Jaya, see for yourself. Vivian sat down and flipped through them slowly. When she reached the screenshot from the day before her birthday, when Jason had told her he was working late and come home at midnight, and she'd made him a bowl of longevity noodles, her hands began to shake. Then she read Zhao's confession. Jason proactively suggested using Vivian to further damage Ethan. She froze as if electrocuted. He volunteered it? He volunteered it? Her voice cracked. Not in anger, but in utter devastation. She dropped the papers, covered her face, and sobbed uncontrollably. I gave up 3 years, a wedding, everything for him, and he volunteered to use me. Natalie sat quietly, saying nothing. Vivian cried for a long time until her voice went hoarse. She looked up at me, eyes swollen. Ethan, he said he'd take me to the Maldives, but he bought only 1 ticket. He said his mother was sick and needed money, so I transferred all the cash I had, 80,000, to him. This morning the police called, and I found out there was no sick mother. He'd photoshopped the hospital record. Her voice was flat now, like someone drowning who had stopped fighting. I lost everything, love and money. I deserve it. The money, I started. No, she cut me off. You don't owe me anything. She stood, neatly stacked the papers on the table, then bowed slightly to Natalie. Miss Lin, thank you for telling me the truth, and I'm sorry for what I said in the parking garage that day. Natalie stood and looked at her for a moment. Miss Jia, the law will recover what Jason owes you. As for the rest, you have to forgive yourself. Vivian nodded, turned, and walked to the door. With her hand on the handle, she paused, not looking back. Ethan, the happiness you have now, you earned it. What I threw away, you cherish it. The door closed. The room fell quiet. Natalie sank back onto the sofa and let out a long breath. Do you feel sorry for her? A little, I said. But you didn't comfort her. She doesn't need comfort right now, I said. She needs the truth. When you hit rock bottom, the only way up is standing on the truth. Natalie tilted her head and smiled faintly. Ethan, do you know who you sounded like just now? Who? My father. She stood and walked to the window, her back to me. Jason's trial is next week. Vanguard is under regulatory investigation, and Zhao Dongming has already been stripped of his license. The press release goes out this afternoon. After that, No one will laugh at you for being abandoned at the altar, because everyone will know it was just one piece of a corporate conspiracy. I joined her by the window. Natalie, thank you for looking into all this. She turned to me. I didn't do it for you. Inni did it for myself. You're my husband. Anyone who throws mud at you throws mud at me. And I have a rule: when someone throws mud at me, I boil it and throw it back. Her eyes flashed with a sharp, beautiful intensity. Inni smiled. What's next? We wait for the trial. Then we have real work to do. Uncle Henry's been acting up. What do you mean? Dad says someone inside the group is funneling assets out. The investigation hit a dead end 6 months ago. He suspects 3 people: Zhou Guotao, Ma Xin-cheng, and Uncle Henry. She paused. Dad wants you to investigate. Why me? Because you're an outsider. Everyone in the Lin family has interests and connections, protecting each other. But you have no old ties, and you've already proven you're clear-headed, tight-lipped, and tough. I thought for a moment. Do you agree? She turned to face me fully, her gaze open. Yes. But on one condition: whatever you find, you tell me first. No matter who it is, don't keep it from me. Done. She reached out and gripped my wrist. Ethan, from today on, the lifeblood of the Lin family and my life is in your hands. Don't make me regret it. I looked down at her hand, fingers strong and steady. Trust me, I said. In outside, the city skyline stretched under the afternoon sun, glass towers glinting. Jason's chapter was over, but both of us knew the real fight was just beginning. The next morning, 10 o'clock, top-floor conference room of Lin Holdings. Richard had called an emergency board meeting with one agenda item, formalizing my position and authority in the group. All 21 directors were present, lining the long table, the atmosphere even heavier than at East Hill Estate. Richard sat at the head and cut straight to it. I've asked you all here to discuss one matter. I propose that Ethan Chen be appointed head of the Supply Chain Reform Task Force with full authority over the restructuring of our supply chain division. This task force reports directly to me, no intermediate layers. The first to object was Mr. Infang, a silver-haired director and one of Richard's founding partners. Mr. Inlin, if I may. How long has Ethan been part of this family? Barely a month. And you want to hand him the most critical part of our operations? What qualifications does he have? Does he know our business? Another director, Mr. Wang, chimed in. In supply chain is our backbone. If something goes wrong, who takes responsibility? A chorus of murmurs followed. Natalie, seated beside Richard, kept a calm face, but I noticed her tapping the table lightly, a habit when she was holding back. Inni stood up. Mr. Infang, directors, your concerns are valid. Let me give you a quick overview. My company specializes in smart warehousing solutions, exactly the kind of work that overlaps with Lin's supply chain needs. Over the past 2 years, I've handled 41 projects. Not a single one failed or ran at a loss. Here are the numbers. I distributed the materials I'd prepared, filled with data, revenue growth, client retention, project delivery times, all clear. Mr. Infang flipped through a few pages, his expression shifting from skepticism to silence. Then Mr. Wang spoke again. Ethan, your numbers look decent, but your company is valued at 30 million. Inland Supply Chain Division does 4 billion a year in revenue. It's like putting a corner store manager in charge of a supermarket chain. How can you claim you're up to it? A few chuckles rippled through the room. Natalie started to rise, but I put a hand on her arm. Mr. Wang, I said, have you ever run a corner store? I have. My first office was 200 square feet, no air conditioning in summer, no heating in winter. In that office, I signed my first client, a major cold chain logistics provider, for over $1 million a year. They needed a custom solution for sub-zero temperature control. No off-the-shelf system could do it. My team and I worked 2 months and built one from scratch. That client now spends 4.7 million a year and has renewed for 3 years. So, Mr. Wang, do you still think a corner store manager can't run a supermarket? Mr. Wang opened his mouth, but no words came. Richard spoke then, his tone casual. Mr. Infang, Mr. Wang, I heard the same questions about qualifications and scale when I was your age. When I started my first factory at 23, my own father said, "A kid like you running a factory." That factory grew tenfold in 10 years. Many of you in this room laughed at me back then. Now you've all shared in 20 years of dividends. The room fell so quiet you could hear the air conditioning. Mr. Enfang lowered his head and closed the file. Mr. Lin, I withdraw my objection. But we need a clear boundary. What is the scope of Ethan's authority in this task force? Full authority, Richard said. Personnel, procurement, budget. He decides everything. If you have a problem, come to me directly. After that, no one else spoke. After the meeting, Natalie stopped in the hallway and turned to me. Ethan, that client you mentioned, the Sub-Zero cold chain solution, was that Grandview's cold chain division? How did you know? Because Grandview is one of Lin's clients? Last year, they nearly cancelled due to supply chain issues. The solution you just described, their project manager mentioned it. He said there was a small company that could do custom work, 0 complaints in 2 years, and he suggested we acquire them. Dad sent procurement to check, but they didn't follow up. She paused, her eyes bright. So that small company was you?
Yes!
Natalie laughed, that particular laugh of surprise turning to admiration, turning to certainty. Ethan, do you realize what that means? You didn't win the board over with words. You won because you'd already fought for Lin without even knowing it. Before I could respond, Richard came up behind us, his cane tapping. He stopped in front of me and gave me a long look. Ethan, Grandview's cold chain issue procurement dropped the ball and you fixed it. I owe you that one. He walked away, his cane fading down the hall. Natalie looked at my expression, then hooked her arm through mine. Come on, mister. Chen, you passed the board. Now, your first fire as head of the supply chain task force hasn't even been lit. The weekend after the board approval, the Lin family held a formal dinner at East Hill Estate. This gathering was larger. Aunt, Uncle Henry, Auntie, plus several branch relatives, Kevin Zhao and his father Derek Zhao. The long table was laden with fine dishes, silverware gleaming, white candles flickering, a surface calm that concealed fierce undercurrents. And as I walked in, Auntie was whispering to Aunt, loud enough for those nearby to hear. Sister, look at Ethan's suit today. Seems custom, but the fabric's just average, probably under 100,000. Aunt stirred her tea, not looking up. Young people just starting out, it's understandable. But after all, the Lin family's door isn't for everyone. In marriage doesn't automatically make you one of us. Natalie started to speak, but I held her back. Not yet, I whispered. When everyone was seated, Derek Zhao raised his glass with a smirk. Ethan, I heard you passed the board. Congratulations. But passing a board is one thing. The real market is another. I understand your supply chain reform plan changes the bidding mechanism and introduces dynamic elimination. You know how many long-time suppliers Lin has, decades of relationships, and you're replacing them with a stroke of the pen? Business isn't just about efficiency. Uncle Derek, you're right that relationships matter, I said. But they can't replace profits. I'll give you numbers. The old suppliers under Zhou Guotao quoted 30% above market price for identical equipment. Last year alone, that cost the group 37 million extra. Imagine what that money could do for R&D or employee retention, but we wasted it on loyalty. Derek's smile stiffened. You've done the math. But you should understand, some suppliers stay in the system because they provide things money can't buy. Then name one, I said. I've gone through 5 years of procurement records. No special transactions, just standard items at standard overpriced quotes. Derek put down his glass, his smile gone. He said nothing more. Uncle Henry stepped in, his tone milder than before but no less sharp. Ethan, Derek isn't opposing reform entirely. He's just saying don't rush it. You're young and decisive. But this family is big. Some things can't be hurried. Uncle Henry, you're right that some things can't be rushed, I said. But some things can't be delayed. In supply chain reform is one of them. Zhou Guotao siphoned off 20 million in 3 years. Inma Xinjiang's brother-in-law treated quality reports like scrap paper, all because we delayed. Uncle Henry flinched at the 20 million figure. Fine, you have your own ideas. As an elder, I've said my piece. Thank you, Uncle Henry. Auntie finally lost patience. She set down her chopsticks and addressed the whole table. Ethan, you talk a good game, but you're basically just a tech guy. You've only been in this family for a short while. Natalie holds you in the highest regard, but you need to show us real substance. Talk won't command respect. Natalie moved to speak, but I held her back. Auntie, you're right, I said. Talk alone won't do. That's why I brought something. I pulled a bound report from my briefcase and set it on the lazy Susan, spinning it so everyone could see. This is the first phase implementation report for the supply chain reform. Procurement costs reduced by 15%. 3 core suppliers recontracted, all terms overhauled. Grandview's cold chain division, which was on the verge of cancelling, has now signed a new 3-year agreement. These numbers aren't my invention. They are signed off by Mr. Zhong's finance team. Aunt picked up the report, flipped through a few pages, and her expression shifted from indifference to silence. She closed it, pushed it aside, and lifted her teacup. Good work, just 4 words, but everyone in the room understood the weight. Coming from someone of her standing, good work was a massive concession. Auntie also took a look, then said nothing, and returned to her meal. Kevin never even touched the report. He leaned back in his chair with a half smile, then stood glass in hand and walked over to me. Ethan, you played this dinner well. The report looks good, too. But let me say one thing. Natalie isn't someone just anyone can deserve. You'd better have what it takes. The Lin family's door is easy to step through, hard to hold your ground in. He drained his glass and walked out. Natalie watched his back disappear, then turned to me, her voice low. You put everyone in their place today. Not everyone. Kevin's still standing. She smiled faintly. Him. He won't be standing much longer. After the dinner, Richard called me alone to his study. He sat behind his desk, his cane resting beside him, studying me for a long time before speaking. I saw everything tonight. You handled it well, said what needed saying, left out what didn't. Now I'm confident in giving you full control of supply chain. Thank you, Dad. At the word Dad, his eyebrows twitched. Then he pulled a file from his drawer. This is the latest update from Zhou Guotao's interrogation. He's revealed a bribery chain involving 11 middle management and above, including 3 board members. This list hasn't been shown to legal, only to me. He handed it to me. Ethan, he said, cleaning house is easy the first time. It's just making a point. The second time you're making enemies. But since you're in this position, there's no room for hesitation. You and Natalie investigate together, root out every last one. In a clean Lin family matters more than anything. I took the list and tucked it away. Dad, don't worry. Not one will slip through. Richard nodded, tapped his cane on the floor. Go on. Natalie's waiting downstairs. The next 2 weeks were the hardest the Lin group had ever faced. Innie went through the 11 names on Zhou's list one by one, with legal director Mr. Chen and CFO Mr. Zhong providing all relevant records from the past 5 years. The investigation was tougher than I'd imagined. These were veterans who left few paper trails. But Zhou, desperate for leniency, gave more and more details, dates, amounts, middlemen, fund routes, and how the spoils were split. The biggest surprise was the 11th name, Uncle Henry. It wasn't just the 7 million that Zhou had funneled to Henry's son. That was only one piece. Zhou confessed that over 5 years, through Henry's controlled accounts, at least $6 million had been siphoned from the supply chain. Henry took 40%. Zhou took 60%. When I laid the file in front of Natalie, she was silent for a long time. Then her voice came flat. 6 million? He sold 50 years of Lin family loyalty for 6 million. Tomorrow's board meeting, Dad will announce it. No. She looked up, her gaze resolute. This time I'll do it. The next morning at 10, the board convened again. All 21 directors were present, but the mood was different. Everyone knew Zhou had talked, but no one knew who he'd named. Fear hung in the air. Richard sat at the head, skipped the formalities and said, There's a new development in Joe's case. Vice President Lin will brief you. Natalie stood. She wore a black suit, hair pulled back perfectly, a blade unsheathed. She distributed copies of the materials to each director, then spoke. Joe's confession lists 11 people within the group. 8 have already been suspended and are under investigation. Today I'm reporting the remaining 3, 2 of whom are board members here today, Mr. Fang and Mr. Wang. The room erupted. Fang and Wang shot up, faces red, voices overlapping, but Natalie stood still, unruffled. She waited until they fell silent, then spoke again. The third is Lin Zhenhai. The room went so quiet you could hear the hum of the AC. Uncle Henry, seated to Richard's left, froze, teacup in hand. Slowly he set it down and stared at Natalie. Natalie, what did you say? She met his gaze. Uncle Henry, over the past 5 years, you and Joe Guotao siphoned $6 million from the supply chain through intermediary accounts. You took 40%, he took 60%. The transaction routes, the middlemen's names, every transfer, all in the file. His face went from white to grey. He leaned back and was silent for a long moment. Then he said, Natalie, when you were little and scraped your knee, I carried you 3 blocks to the emergency room. Natalie's eyes reddened, but her voice never wavered. Uncle Henry, I remember. That's why I'm announcing this here, to give you one last dignity. And if I didn't remember, this file would be on the police's desk. He looked into her eyes, then bowed his head. I confess. One word, light as ash. Security escorted all 3 out. And as Henry passed Natalie, he paused, lips moving, but ultimately said nothing. After the meeting, only Natalie and I remained. She stood by the floor-to-ceiling window back to me, looking out at the city skyline, and her shoulders trembled once, then steadied. Innie walked over and stood beside her. You swung that axe yourself. Yes, she said. It hurts more when it's family. She turned to face me, eyes red, but no tears. But if I hadn't cut it, the Lin family would have rotted from within. Thank you for letting me be the one to announce it. This is my burden, not yours. She pulled a set of keys from her suit pocket and placed them in my palm, keys to her apartment. From today on, she said, I have no secrets left, the lifeblood of the Lin family. My life, they're in your hands. Whatever comes, we'll carry it together. I closed my fingers around the keys, looking at her eyes. In that moment, one thought crystallized. This woman, I would protect her for life. Outside, sunlight broke through the clouds and blazed across the skyline. By the end of the 3rd month, the supply chain reform was complete. Procurement costs down 18%. Bad debt recovery at 60%. 3 core suppliers re-signed. When CFO Zhong placed the final report on Richard's desk, Richard flipped through every page and said, Ethan, it took me 2 years to turn my first company profitable. You turned our supply chain around in 3 months with a perfect score. 3 months, and the dust settled. But one thing had weighed on me all that time. The wedding 3 months ago, Natalie had settled for me. She'd stood by me in that custom gown when everyone expected me to be a laughingstock, saying, I've been waiting for that invitation for 4 years. But that day, I never knelt. Never said those 3 words, and we'd exchanged rings in chaotic haste. I owed her a real wedding. Ryan helped me arrange everything for 2 weeks. We chose the back garden at East Hill Estate, under the old plane tree where Natalie had loved to celebrate her birthdays as a child. When Richard heard my plan, he was silent for a moment, then clapped my shoulder. Natalie loves that tree. Go ahead. At dusk, the garden lights came on one by one. Warm-colored fairy lights hung from the branches like scattered stars. Inflowers flew in from Holland. The canopy was handmade lace, and the dessert table held her favorite tiramisu. Only about 50 guests, close Lin family and a few of my own friends, but everyone was sincere. Natalie was brought by her mother, told it was a family dinner. She wore a simple white dress, hair loose, and as she stepped into the garden, she stopped at the entrance. She took in the flowers, the lights, the white canopy under the tree, and me standing there in a formal 3-piece suit. A slow smile spread across her face. Ethan, what are you up to now? I walked to her and pulled out a velvet box, not a ring, we'd already exchanged those. Inside was a necklace, a platinum key pendant that caught the light. On the key was engraved, 4 years found you. Natalie looked down at the pendant, her fingers tracing the words. When she looked up, her eyes were glistening. You remember that keychain? You kept a faded plastic keychain for 4 years, I said. I'm giving you a real one. This key doesn't open any lock. It means that with me, you never have to unlock anything, never have to prove anything. You are everything. Her lips trembled, a single tear clinging to her lashes. The MC handed me the microphone. I looked at Natalie as the guests fell silent, the lights swaying in the night breeze. Natalie, 3 months ago at our wedding, you said you wouldn't make grand vows. You said the Lin family's door and resources were mine. That was your way. Today, I'm saying what I should have said then. I dropped to one knee. The garden fell absolutely still. My mother covered her mouth. Ryan held up his phone, hands shaking. Richard rose with his cane, and Margaret was already dabbing her eyes. Natalie looked down at me, tears finally streaming freely down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them, she just watched. Natalie Lin, I've said a lot of things in my life. Some I meant, some I didn't. But today, in front of everyone, I say this. I love you. Not because you stood up for me. Not because you gave me $280 million, not for any of those things. I love you because on the worst day of my life, a woman I barely knew stepped forward and said, I've waited 4 years. From that moment, I knew I owed you a proper wedding and a full confession. As long as you stay, I will never leave. Those 3 words, I owe them to you from 3 months ago. Today is your birthday. I am paying my debt. I opened the box and took out the necklace. Natalie reached out, her fingers trembling slightly. I fastened it around her neck, the platinum key resting against her collarbone, gleaming in the light. When she spoke, her voice was hoarse with tears, but every word was distinct. Ethan, 3 months ago you asked if I'd be your bride, and I said I'd waited 4 years for that invitation. Today I'll tell you something new. I will stand by your side for a lifetime. She pulled me up, rose on her toes and lightly touched her lips to mine. The garden erupted. Ryan was the first to stand and applaud, clapping until his hands were red. My mother sobbed, her false lashes falling off. Champagne corks popped, and ribbons of gold drifted down from the tree like a golden rain. Vivian was there too, standing at the edge of the crowd in a simple navy dress, her hair cut short, thinner, but with brighter eyes. She raised her champagne glass toward me, a toast from afar. Innie nodded. She smiled, a bitter smile, but no longer the shattered one from the parking garage 3 months ago. It was the smile of someone who had finally accepted and let go. I looked back down at the tiny platinum key on Natalie's collarbone, winking in the light. She leaned against my shoulder, gazing up at the fairy lights in the tree. Ethan, isn't life strange? 3 months ago, I thought I was going to attend my crush's wedding, and now I'm in his arms. I don't call that strange, I said. I call it fate. She laughed and poked my side. You don't believe in fate. I didn't. Now I do. The lights swayed in the night breeze. The scent of osmanthus drifted from the hillside. Guests raised their glasses in celebration, laughter and blessings floating into the dark sky. 4 years ago, in a downpour, I'd handed my umbrella to a stranger. 4 years later, at my wedding, she stood beside me in a custom gown and said, I've been waiting for that invitation for 4 years. I leaned close and whispered 3 words in her ear. Natalie's ears turned pink as she looked up at me, her eyes holding an entire galaxy. It was the most beautiful sight I'd ever seen.